What does it take to keep going when everything, the sea, the gods, the years, is against you? You already know about Troy, the wooden horse, the 10-year war. You know it ended. But here's what most people never think about. What came after? He was the man who ended it. He was the one who thought of the horse. He was the most cunning man in the Greek army. And the journey home almost destroyed him completely. Not the war, the journey home. 20 years away from a small rocky island he loved. And of those 20 years, 10 spent at sea, on open water, with gods working against him, watching every one of his men die. What does it take to survive that? What does it take to still believe you're going home, when every wave says otherwise? Tonight, while you sleep, we are going to answer it. Now, let's go back. Back to the moment the smoke was still rising over Troy, and one man turned his face west. His name is Odysseus, and this is how it begins. Close your eyes. Breathe. Troy is behind him. The smoke is still rising from the city when the fleet leaves the Troad. The Greek ships scattered by the winds, each commander taking his own course. The great alliance that had held for 10 years dissolving the moment the common purpose was achieved. Agamemnon goes one way. Menelaus goes another. Ajax the Lesser meets the rock that Poseidon breaks beneath his feet. Odysseus goes west. He wants to go home. He has wanted to go home since before the war began. Since the moment on the beach at Ithaca when he looked at his infant son in the path of the plow and chose sanity over pretense and accepted that he was going to Troy. For 10 years in the Greek camp on the plain, through the rage of Achilles and the death of Patroclus and the wooden horse and the burning, behind all of it, underneath it, the constant orientation, west. Ithaca, Penelope, the son who is now 10 years old and does not know his father's face. He is going home. He does not know it will take 10 more years. The man. Homer begins the Odyssey not with a place or a battle, but with a person. Tell me, he says, about a man of many ways. The polytropos, the many-turned, the resourceful, the one who has more angles of approach to any problem than other men know exist. He has seen many cities. He has seen many minds. He has suffered much on the open sea, trying to win his life and the return of his companions. He did not win their return. Homer says this at the beginning, before the story starts. His companions died, all of them, by their own recklessness. He says, they ate the cattle of the sun god and were destroyed for it. And this too Homer tells you before you have met any of them. They will die. He will survive. This is the shape of the story before it begins. The first stop was Ismarus, the city of the Cyclops in Thrace. Odysseus and his men sacked it. Not a heroic act, not a quest-driven necessity. Simply the reflex of men who have spent 10 years raiding the coastlines of Asia Minor in the way that armies in the field sustain themselves. Sack, take what is needed, leave. He told his men to leave quickly. They did not listen. They stayed on the beach. They feasted. They drank the wine of the city they had just destroyed. The Cyclops gathered reinforcements overnight. In the morning, they attacked. Odysseus lost 72 men on that beach, 6 men from each of his 12 ships. Before the journey had properly begun, he made them keep rowing. He did not stop. He did not hold a funeral on the beach where the Cyclops were still massing. He wept, he later said. He told the Phaeacians this, in the long account he gave them of his wanderings. But he did not stop. He kept rowing. A storm. Zeus sent a storm as the fleet rounded the Cape of Malea in the south, the cape at the bottom of the Peloponnese, the last piece of the Greek mainland before open water. A storm that drove them off course, south and then west, far past anything they knew. He was no longer in the Greek world. He was somewhere else. This is the transition the Odyssey requires. The movement from the historical coastlines of the Aegean into something else, a world where islands appear and disappear and cannot be found on any map, where time runs differently, where the journey home stretches and stretches regardless of how hard the oars pull. He was in the world of myth now, moving through it in real time, encountering its contents with the combination of curiosity and practical intelligence that was his specific signature. The land of the Lotus Eaters. The first place. An island, somewhere south, somewhere in the direction of North Africa. The people there were not hostile. This was not a danger that came with spears and shouting. It came with flowers. The lotus. He sent scouts. 3 men. They ate the lotus that the island's people offered them, and the lotus did what the lotus did. Not kill, not wound, not threaten. Simply remove. Remove the memory of home. Remove the desire to return. Replace the whole complex texture of a life somewhere else with the gentle sufficiency of the present moment. The men did not want to leave. They had forgotten why leaving mattered. Odysseus dragged them back to the ships by force, weeping, bound under the benches so they could not return to shore. He ordered the fleet to row immediately. He understood the danger of forgetting. He understood it viscerally, in his body, with the urgency of a man who has defined himself by the act of returning. If he forgot Ithaca, there was no Odysseus. If there was no Ithaca to return to, the whole project of himself collapsed. He dragged his men away from forgetting. He kept going. 12 ships. He had 12 ships when he left Troy. He would have 1 when he reached Phaeacia. He would have none when he finally reached Ithaca. The losses would come gradually, one catastrophe at a time. In the particular way that the Odyssey is structured, each episode a new test, each test requiring not strength but judgment, and the men who did not have Odysseus's judgment dying for it. They are all in the ships now, all 12 crews, the survivors of Troy, of the Cyclones, of the storm off Malea. Men who had been at war for 10 years and wanted nothing more than to be home, rowing west, watching the horizon for the shape of something familiar. It would not come easily. It would not come for 10 years. He stood at the prow. This is how the Odyssey wants him. At the prow of the leading ship, looking forward, always forward, with the specific quality of attention he brought to everything. Not the wide, unfocused gaze of a man looking at scenery, but the focused reading of a landscape for what it means, what it contains, what it will require of him. He was reading the sea. He was calculating. He was always thinking. Ithaca, the island he was sailing toward, was small. Not like Troy, not like Mycenae or Sparta. A rocky island in the Ionian Sea, hilly, covered in olive trees, with a harbor that he knew the shape of the way you know the shape of the things you have loved a long time. Penelope was there. She had been there for 10 years, managing the kingdom, managing the situation that had developed in his absence. The suitors, the men from the surrounding islands who had moved into his house and were eating through his stores and waiting for his wife to choose one of them and declaring his son unable to resist them. She had not chosen. She had woven. She had told them, "I will choose when I finish the shroud for Laertes, my husband's old father. Let me finish the weaving and then I will decide." She wove during the day. At night she unraveled it. She had been weaving and unraveling for 3 years by the time Odysseus left Troy. Waiting, buying time, believing, or deciding to keep believing that he was coming. He was coming. He did not know yet what was waiting for him at home. Neither did she know how close he was, or how far, or through what the sea still intended to put him. The sea. Poseidon was against him, not because of the temple violation that had turned Athena against the Greeks generally. That was Ajax's crime, not his. Poseidon's anger at Odysseus was personal and specific and would come to its crisis on an island called the Land of the Cyclops, which is the next stop. For now the sea was just the sea, vast, indifferent, crossed by the oars of 12 ships moving west through a world that had become strange. Behind him, Troy in the smoke, 10 years and the dead. The war that had defined everything and was now finished, though its consequences were not finished, would not be finished for years. Before him, home. Between him and home, everything the Odyssey contains. Every monster and goddess and island and temptation and test and loss. Every one of his men. He would lose all of them. He did not know that yet. He stood at the prow. He looked west. He kept going. Sleep now. Let the 12 ships move through the dark water, the oars quiet, the men sleeping in shifts, the stars above doing what stars do when men are lost, staying fixed while everything beneath them moves, providing the orientation that the sea does not. Odysseus is awake. He is always awake. He is reading the stars and reading the water and thinking, always thinking, about the distance between where he is and where he needs to be and what the sea between those 2 points contains. He does not know yet. He is going to find out. One island at a time. One impossible thing at a time. The same way he has always moved through the world. Eyes open. Going forward. Going home. Close your eyes. Breathe. There is an island across from another island. The first island is lush, wild goats, untouched vineyards, grass to the water's edge, a natural harbor where ships can anchor without moorings. It is the kind of place that could sustain a civilization if anyone had the patience and the vision to build one. No one had. The Cyclopes lived across the water on the second island, and they did not farm, and they did not build harbors, and they did not have councils or laws. They had caves in the hillsides and flocks of sheep and the particular self-sufficiency of creatures that are large enough not to need anything they cannot take. Odysseus looked at the smoke rising from the second island. He wanted to know what lived there. This is the thing about Odysseus that saves him and nearly kills him in equal measure. He always wants to know. He wanted to know about the Cyclopes and stayed too long on the beach. He wants to know about the island with the smoke. His men do not want to know. They have learned enough about what the world contains on the way from Troy to here. They have had their share of encountering the contents of an unfamiliar place. He took 12 men. He brought wine, not ordinary wine, wine that Marin, a priest of Apollo at Ismarus, had given him, a gift for being spared when Odysseus sacked the city. Dark wine, so potent that it was mixed 20 parts water to 1 part wine. He brought it in a skin because he had, he later said, a feeling. He was always having feelings. He was usually right. The cave was enormous. Empty when they entered, the Cyclops was out with his flocks. The men saw the cheeses, the lambs, the kids in their pens, the pails of whey. They said, "Take the cheeses, drive the lambs to the ships, go." Odysseus refused. He wanted to see the owner. He wanted to know if the owner would give them gifts, the guest gifts, the xenia, that the laws of hospitality required. He was a man who had built his understanding of the world on those laws. The laws said, a stranger comes to your door. You feed them and house them and give them gifts before asking who they are. He wanted to know if the Cyclops followed the laws. He found out. Polyphemus came home at dusk. He threw an enormous log onto the fire, the light filling the cave. He saw the strangers. He asked who they were. Odysseus told him, "We are Greeks, from the army that sacked Troy on our way home. We ask for your hospitality as guests under the protection of Zeus." Polyphemus said, "The Cyclopes do not care about Zeus." He reached into the dark and picked up 2 of the men and killed them against the floor of the cave and ate them. For breakfast, he ate 2 more. He rolled the boulder across the cave entrance and left with his sheep. Odysseus thought he could kill Polyphemus while he slept. He had his sword, but a dead Cyclops cannot move the boulder, and they would be sealed inside the cave forever. Not murder, not yet. He found a wooden stake, an olive tree the Cyclops had left in the cave, enormous. He cut it down to size and sharpened one end and hardened the point in the fire and hid it under the dome. He waited. Evening. 2 more men eaten. Polyphemus asked, "What is your name, stranger? I will give you a gift." Odysseus said, "My name is Nobody." Polyphemus said, "Then Nobody I will eat last. That is my gift to you." He laughed and lay down and slept. Odysseus heated the stake in the fire until the point glowed. He drove it into the Cyclops' eye. The sound Polyphemus made brought the other Cyclopes to the cave entrance. They called through the boulder, "Who is hurting you? Who is killing you?" Polyphemus screamed, "Nobody. Nobody is killing me." The Cyclopes said, "Well, if nobody is hurting you, you must be sick. Pray to your father Poseidon." They went home. In the morning, Polyphemus moved the boulder to let his sheep out. He sat in the opening, arms wide, feeling for men trying to escape. Odysseus tied his men under the bellies of the sheep. He went out last, clinging beneath the largest ram. The one Polyphemus felt most carefully lingered with longest, speaking to it as if the animal might know something. The ram carried Odysseus into the sunlight. They ran for the ships. They were pushing off from shore when Odysseus made the mistake. His men were rowing, safe, the distance opening between the ships and the island, and Odysseus stood at the stern and called back, "Cyclops, if anyone asks who blinded you, tell them it was Odysseus of Ithaca, son of Laertes." His men begged him to stop. He shouted it again. Polyphemus reached into the hillside and tore off the top of a mountain and threw it in the direction of the voice. It nearly swamped the ships. Odysseus was lucky, or he was Odysseus, which is sometimes the same thing. But Polyphemus called out to his father, "Poseidon, god of the sea, Father, hear me. Let Odysseus of Ithaca never reach home. Or if he must, let him arrive late and alone on a foreign ship to find trouble waiting." Poseidon heard. This is the origin of the suffering. Not Athena's anger, not the storms, not any of the catastrophes still ahead. All of it comes from this. One man could not cross open water back to his ships in silence. He had defeated the Cyclops with cleverness. He had gotten out of the cave with Nobody and the ram and the sharpened stake. He was safe. And then he needed Polyphemus to know his name. Because Odysseus, who valued his mind above everything, could not let the victory go unclaimed, could not let Nobody receive the credit for what Odysseus had done. He is the most intelligent man in the Greek world. He nearly drowned everyone because he needed the monster to know his name. They sailed on. One ship fewer, eventually. Not here, but the losses were coming. The men who had been eaten in the cave were gone. The men who remained were quiet on the oars, shaken in the specific way of people who have survived something by margins that did not feel like enough. Odysseus stood at the stern looking back at the island. The smoke from Polyphemus's fire was rising. Somewhere beneath the sea, Poseidon had heard his son's prayer. The journey home just became something else entirely. Sleep now. Let the island of the Cyclopes fall behind the ships. Let the night cover the water and the stars come out, and the men at the oars find the rhythm that men find when they need not to think about what is behind them. The eye is out. They are alive. They are free. And Poseidon is awake in the deep water somewhere beneath the keel, very still, the way gods are still when they have made a decision. Odysseus gave the monster his name. The sea heard it. The sea will not forget it. Sleep. Close your eyes. Breathe. Between the Cyclops and Circe there were stops. The island of Aeolus, the keeper of the winds, who received Odysseus warmly and gave him a gift, a leather bag containing all the winds that could blow him off course. Only the west wind left free to carry him home. For 9 days the crew rowed, and the west wind blew and Ithaca appeared on the horizon, close enough to see the fires. Odysseus slept. He had not slept in 9 days. His men, curious about the bag, convinced each other it contained gold and silver that Odysseus was keeping from them. They opened it. All the winds escaped at once. The ships were blown back to Aeolus. He refused to help a second time. A man that unlucky, he said, must be hated by the gods. There was nothing more to be done for him. They rowed. They rowed without wind across open water until their arms gave out, and arrived eventually at another island. And the island was Aea, and on Aea lived Circe. The men were broken by then, not beaten in the way that the word broken usually means, not defeated, not surrendered. Broken in the way of people who have been accumulating losses for too long in too short a time. The Cyclones, the Lotus Eaters, the cave, the bag of winds, and Ithaca disappearing behind them again. 2 days they lay on the shore of Aea and did not move. On the third day Odysseus climbed a hill and looked at the island. Smoke, rising from the forest interior. He went back to the ships and divided the men into 2 groups. One group would explore. One would stay with the ships. He drew lots. Eurylochus led the exploring party. He would regret this for the rest of his life. Or rather, he would have regretted it for the rest of his life, but the rest of his life was not very long. They found the house in the forest, a stone house, in a clearing, with wolves and lions moving around it. Not wild, not threatening. Tame, fawning like dogs around a master. The men were disturbed by this in the way that the wrong behavior from a dangerous animal is always disturbing. They heard singing from inside. A woman's voice, working at a loom, singing the kind of song that makes the air around it feel different. One of the men called out. She came to the door. She was beautiful in the way that the dangerous women in the Odyssey are beautiful. The beauty not decorative but functional, a quality that creates a specific kind of suspension in the men who encounter it, a pause in their judgment precisely when their judgment is most needed. She invited them in. All of them went in, except Eurylochus. He stayed outside. He watched through the window. He did not know why he stayed. He later told Odysseus he had a bad feeling, which was the first competent instinct anyone in the crew had displayed since the bag of winds. Circe fed them cheese, barley meal, honey, wine. A meal set before hungry sailors with the particular generosity of someone who knows that hungry men do not think carefully about what they are eating. The wine had something in it. She touched each of them with her wand. They became pigs. Their minds stayed human. Homer is careful about this, specific about it, the most terrible detail in a terrible moment. They knew what they were. They felt what they felt. They were weeping inside the pig bodies, in the sty where she drove them, weeping and human inside the wrong shape. Eurylochus ran. He could barely speak when he reached Odysseus. The story came out in fragments. Odysseus took his sword and started for the forest. Eurylochus grabbed his knees. He said, "Do not go. You will not come back. Leave them. Save the rest of us." Odysseus walked anyway. He was alone in the forest heading toward the house of a witch who had just turned 22 of his men into pigs. And he was going anyway, because he was Odysseus and his men were his men, and that was the entire extent of the calculation. Hermes met him on the path. The god of travelers, of boundaries, of the spaces between here and there. Hermes appeared in the shape of a young man, and he said, "Where are you going alone in a place you don't know?" He said, "Your friends are pigs." He said, "I will help you." He gave Odysseus a herb, moly, black-rooted, white-flowered, known to the gods and fatal to mortals to uproot. But Hermes pulled it from the ground and gave it to him. He told him to eat it before the meal Circe offered. It would prevent the transformation. He told him what to do when the wand came. When she touches you with the wand, draw your sword. Rush at her as if you mean to kill her. She will offer terms. Make her swear by the sticks, the oath no god breaks, that she intends no further harm. Then accept what she offers. Hermes left. Odysseus went in. Circe gave him the meal. He ate the moly with it. She touched him with the wand. Nothing happened. She stared at him. He drew his sword. He rushed at her. She fell back and grabbed his knees. The position of supplication, the same gesture his men and his family and strangers had used at his knees across the years of the war. And she said, "Who are you?" "No man has ever resisted my drugs." "You must be Odysseus. Hermes told me once that you would come here on your way from Troy." She said, "Come to bed." He did not immediately say yes. He told her, "How can I come to bed with you when you have turned my men into pigs? Swear the oath. The oath by the sticks that you will not harm me further, that you will not use your power against me while I am vulnerable." She swore. He accepted. He stayed a year. A full year on the island of Aeae with Circe. This too Homer records without apology or extensive explanation. The men were restored. She touched each pig with the wand, and they returned to themselves, younger than before, more handsome, taller, and they wept when they saw Odysseus, and he wept too. And Circe brought them to the main house and fed them properly. And then a year passed. They ate well. They were cared for. The island was comfortable in the way that a year of ease is comfortable when you have been through what they had been through. Then the men came to Odysseus. They said, "It is time. We need to go home." He had forgotten, or not forgotten. He had let the year carry him, the way ease carries people, the way the absence of the next crisis allows the one after to seem theoretical, manageable, not yet. His men reminded him. He went to Circe. She told him what was next. Not a route, not a set of sailing instructions. Something worse. "You must go to the underworld first," she said. "Before you can go home, you must go to the land of the dead and speak to the shade of the prophet Tiresias. He alone among the dead retains his mind fully. He will tell you the way home." Odysseus sat with this information for a while. No man had ever sailed to the underworld and returned, except Heracles, whom Circe did not mention, possibly because Heracles was not a useful comparison. Heracles was the son of a god, and what Heracles survived was not necessarily what an ordinary mortal could survive, even an extraordinary ordinary mortal like Odysseus. He asked her how. She told him. She gave him detailed instructions, the route, the winds, the sacrifices, the way to call the dead up from below and make them speak, and keep them from simply overwhelming the living man standing at the edge of their world. She gave him supplies. She told him to come back to Aie when it was done. He prepared the ships. In the morning, before they left, one of the men was found dead. Elpenor. He had been sleeping on the roof of Circe's house, drunk, some sources say, or simply sleeping in the open air as men do in warm climates. He woke to the noise of departure, forgot where he was, fell from the roof, died before anyone knew. They were in such a hurry to leave that they left him on the island, unburied. Odysseus did not know yet that he would meet Elpenor in the underworld. Elpenor would be the first shade to find him there. The dead, it turns out, remember what the living forget in their haste. The ship left Aie. Circe had given them a wind, a fair wind, a going wind, the kind of wind that a sorceress who controls the weather gives to travelers she is sending on a specific path. The wind was blowing toward the underworld. The men rowed anyway, out of habit, out of the need to feel like they were participating in their own direction. Odysseus stood at the prow. Behind him, an island where they had spent a year and lost none. Before him, the edge of the world, and below it. Sleep now. Let the ship move on the wind Circe made. Let Aie disappear behind it, the smoke from the forest rising, the stone house quiet now, the wolves and lions in the clearing with no sailors to confuse them. Circe is weaving again. She is always weaving when they leave. The island goes quiet. The sea opens. There is a year of ease and comfort behind them on that island, and it was real, and it mattered, and it is over. There is the underworld ahead, and after the underworld, if they can bear it, the long way home. Sleep. The wind is fair. The oars are quiet. The dead are waiting. Close your eyes. Breathe. There is a place at the edge of the world where the river ocean runs, and beyond the ocean the sun does not reach. A place of perpetual dusk where a grove of black poplars and willows stands above two rivers, the Styx, the river of hate, and the Acheron, the river of woe, and where the dead gather in their multitudes, drifting like smoke, like shadows, like the memory of people rather than the people themselves. Odysseus sailed there. He followed Circe's directions to the letter, past the island of Aie, past the limits of the wind she had given him, to the edge where the world thins and the air changes and the light, what little there is of it, comes from no visible source. He beached the ship. He walked to the grove. He dug the pit Circe had described. He poured the offerings, honey and milk, then wine, then water, then barley meal, and over all of it the blood of the sheep he had brought from Aie. The dead came. They came from everywhere. Young women and old men and soldiers still wearing their wounds, and brides, and young men who had not lived long enough to be anything except young men. The whole catalog of the dead, pressing toward the blood, because blood is what the dead need to speak. Blood is warmth and life and the capacity for coherent thought, and without it they are only shadows moving in the dark without memory or voice. Odysseus drew his sword. He held them back. He was waiting for Tiresias, but Elpenor came first. He was the youngest shade there, the most recent dead, the man who had fallen from the roof of Circe's house that morning and been left behind unburied. He had arrived in the underworld before Odysseus had even left the island. He had not yet crossed the rivers properly. The unburied could not. The rites of burial were not ceremonial. They were functional. The dead needed them to pass fully into the world below. He stood before Odysseus, and his face was the face of a man who needed something. He said, "Remember me. Go back to Aie. Build me a pyre. Bury my or with me, so that men who come after will know I was a sailor." Odysseus wept. He promised. He kept the promise. Later, he always kept his promises. It was the other things he sometimes lost track of: the sense of time, the direction of home, the specific urgency of being somewhere rather than somewhere else. He kept his promises. His mother came. Anticlea. He had not known she was dead. When he left for Troy, she was alive, managing the household on Ithaca, waiting the way all the women left behind by the war waited. She had died while he was gone. Of grief, she would tell him. Not illness, not age, not any physical cause. She missed him. She waited for him. The waiting had killed her. He did not let her drink the blood yet. Not until Tiresias had spoken. He held his sword between her and the pit. He would not look at her. Not yet. Tiresias came. The prophet, blind in life, given back his mind in death. The one shade in all the underworld who retained full intelligence without the blood, who moved through the dark with the clarity that the living Tiresias had always had, seeing what others could not see. He drank from the pit. He spoke. He told Odysseus about Poseidon, that the god was the source of his suffering and would remain the source until the journey itself became an act of atonement. He told him, "You will reach Ithaca. You will find trouble there, but you will survive it." He told him about the cattle. "There is an island ahead, Phaeacia. The cattle of the sun god Helios graze there. Do not touch them, whatever your men say, whatever hunger demands. If the cattle are harmed, the ships will be destroyed, and you will lose all your men and arrive home alone on a foreign ship." He told him, "After Ithaca, there is still more. You must carry in or inland until you reach people who do not know the sea, who have never seen an oar, who will ask what the winnowing fan on your shoulder is. There you must plant it and sacrifice to Poseidon. Then, and only then, will the god let you rest." Tiresias drank the last of the blood and faded back into the dark. Odysseus lowered his sword. His mother came to the pit and drank and looked at her son with the specific look of someone who has not seen someone in a long time and cannot quite believe that now. Here is when they are finally in the same place. She told him about Ithaca. His father Laertes was alive, but barely, grieving, living rough, refusing comfort. Penelope was faithful, still waiting, holding the suitors off, but barely. Telemachus was grown, managing what he could manage. She said, "Your wife's heart is good. She weeps for you, but she waits." He tried to hold her. 3 times. 3 times she slipped through his arms like smoke, like shadow, like the memory of a person rather than the person. He wept. She said, "This is what happens to mortals when they die. We become this. The sinews do not hold the flesh. The flesh does not hold the warmth. We are not substantial anymore." She said, "Go back. Remember what you have seen. Tell Penelope." She faded. Then the dead came in their multitudes. He could not hold them all back. He did not try. He held his sword, and he let them come to the blood one by one, and he listened. Agamemnon came. He told Odysseus how he died. The bath, the net, Clytemnestra's hands. He said, "Do not trust women. Go home cautiously. Do not walk openly into your house, as if trust is warranted." He said, "At least your wife is not like mine." He said, "Penelope will receive you as you deserve." There was a bitterness in him that death had not softened, the bitterness of a man who had conquered Troy and been killed in his bath by the person who was supposed to welcome him home. He asked about his son Orestes. Odysseus told him what he knew. Agamemnon wept. Achilles came. Achilles, who had chosen Troy and the short, brilliant life over the long, quiet life. Achilles in the underworld, moving through it with the same restless energy he had moved through everything. Odysseus told him, "You are honored among the dead the way a god is honored among the living. Death has not diminished you." Achilles said, "Do not console me with words about death. I would rather be a laborer on the surface of the earth, working for a poor man, than king of all the dead." He asked about his son Neoptolemus. Odysseus told him everything: the wooden horse, the courage, the way the young man had fought. Achilles listened, and the shade of Achilles moved through the fields of asphodel with long strides, glad, because his son had been worthy. This was the only thing that moved him, not honor, not being remembered, not any of the posthumous glory. His son had been worthy. Ajax was there, the great Ajax, who had killed himself over the armor, who had stood at the ships and held the line and been denied the prize he deserved. Odysseus spoke to him. Ajax said nothing. He turned away. Even death had not resolved it. Even in the underworld, among all the other dead, Ajax would not speak to the man whose cleverness had taken what his strength had earned. Odysseus called after him. Ajax walked away, into the dark. Odysseus stood there for a long moment. He saw others. He saw Minos judging the dead, the old king of Crete with his golden scepter, deciding their fates. He saw Orion driving the animals he had hunted across the fields of asphodel, still hunting, the pursuit continuing even here. He saw the punished, Tantalus, standing in water up to his chin, the water receding when he bent to drink, the fruit-laden branches lifting when he reached for them. Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the hill and watching it roll back and beginning again. He saw Heracles, or the shade of Heracles, the true Heracles, the poem notes, was on Olympus with the gods. What moved through the underworld was only the image of him, the shadow Heracles, still in his lion's skin and with his bow drawn, the posture of perpetual readiness. The shade looked at Odysseus and recognized a man who had suffered, and they spoke briefly, one toiling man to another. Then the dead began pressing too close. The sheer number of them, the thousands of years of the dead, all moving toward the blood and the warmth, and the living man standing at the pit. It was too much. The fear that came over Odysseus in that moment was one of the few times in the Odyssey that Homer records him as simply afraid, without calculation, without a plan already forming. He ran. He went back to the ship. He told the crew to row. They rowed. The underworld receded behind them. The light came back slowly, the gray of the edge of the world giving way to the pale pre-dawn, then the actual dawn, then the full light of day on the open sea. The men did not speak for a long time. Neither did Odysseus. He had seen his mother. He had tried to hold her 3 times. 3 times she had slipped through his hands. He sat at the stern and he looked at the water, and he understood something that the underworld teaches and that the living cannot learn any other way. That the people we lose do not disappear exactly. They become something that cannot be held, cannot be recovered, can only be remembered. He was still going home. Home was not what he had left it. It could not be. 10 years had passed. His mother was dead. Ithaca was the same island it had always been, the rocky harbor and the olive trees and the house on the hill. The people inside it were not the same. He was not the same. None of that changed the direction. West. Home. Still. Sleep now. Let the underworld close behind the ship like water closes behind a passing oar. Let the dead return to their asphodel fields and their rivers and the particular eternity they inhabit. which is not suffering exactly and not peace exactly, but the long continuation of whatever they were when they were alive, without the urgency that living provides. Anticlea is there. She knows now that he is coming. She knows he is alive. She knows he will make it. Let her have that. Let the dead have their small knowledges while the living row on. The sea is opening ahead. There are more islands, more things to survive. He is going home. He saw the dead, and he is still going home. Sleep. Close your eyes. Breathe. Circe had warned him. When he returned to Aea after the Underworld, as she had told him to, as he had promised, she told him everything that was still ahead. She did not soften it. She was not that kind of woman. She laid it out with the precision of someone who has been watching the sea long enough to know exactly what it contains and has decided that the most useful thing she can give him is the truth. She told him about the Sirens. She told him about Scylla and Charybdis. She told him he would have to choose between them. She gave him no good options. She fed him and his men one last time, and in the morning they left Aea for the last time, and the journey that had begun in Troy was entering its final passages. Or what should have been its final passages. The Sirens. Start here. Stay here a while. Because the Sirens are one of those images that the human imagination has been unable to put down for 3,000 years, and they deserve the attention. They lived on an island, not a beautiful island. The texts are specific about this, and the specificity matters. The meadow around them was full of bones, the rotting remains of men who had come toward the music and beached their ships and walked ashore and never left. The island was a graveyard disguised as a meadow. The beauty of the sound was the approach to a charnel house. They were not mermaids. The mermaid is a later conflation, the fishtail added by medieval tradition. In Homer, they are not described physically at all. We do not know what they looked like. The later tradition made them bird women, the body of a bird with the face and voice of a woman, which is its own kind of disturbing image. What Homer tells us is the voice. The Sirens knew things. This is the detail that separates Homeric sirens from every lesser version of the story. They were not simply beautiful. They were not simply dangerous. They were knowledgeable. They knew everything that had happened on the wide earth. This is what they sang. Not wordless music, not pure sensation. They sang information. They sang the events of the Trojan War to Odysseus as his ship approached. They knew his name. They knew his story. They offered to sing him the knowledge of everything that had happened and everything that would happen, the complete account of the world laid out in music. Come here, they said. Come here, Odysseus, great glory of the Greeks. Beach your ship and listen and go away knowing more than you have ever known. This is the specific temptation for Odysseus. Not beauty, not physical desire, knowledge. If you want to understand what the Sirens were testing in Odysseus, you have to understand what he values most. He is not Achilles. He is not drawn toward glory. He is not Ajax. He is not driven by pride in his own strength. He is the man who always wants to know what is in the cave, who stayed too long on the island of the Cyclops because he wanted to meet the owner, who went into the Sicily city when his men were telling him to leave. He wants to know. The Sirens offered him everything he wanted. Not gold, not power, not even Ithaca and Penelope and the end of the journey. The knowledge of all things. Circe had given him two options. He could do what his sailors did. Put beeswax in their ears, seal the sound out, row past the island in the complete silence of men who cannot hear what is calling to them. This was the practical solution. This was the solution for people who understood that the content of the song was less important than the destination. Or he could listen. He could have himself tied to the mast, have the crew seal their ears, and listen to the sirens with his body bound and his ears open. Circe had not told him to choose the second option. She had described it as a possibility. She had described it the way she described everything, neutrally, factually, as information for a man who would make his own decision. He chose to listen. Of course he did. He was Odysseus. He told the men. He gathered them, and he told them what was coming. The way he told them about important things when he had to, directly, without ornament, with the specific respect of a commander who believed that his men deserved to know what they were sailing into. He told them, "There will be an island. You will not hear it. I will. Tie me to the mast. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, no matter how I beg or threaten or command, do not untie me. If I order you to untie me, tie me tighter." The men nodded. They understood him, or thought they did. They softened the beeswax and pressed it into their ears. The island appeared. He heard them from a distance. Before the words were distinguishable, there was the quality of it, the way a sound affects the body before the mind has processed it, the way certain music creates a physical response that precedes comprehension. It was not painful. It was not alarming. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. And then the words resolved. "Come here, Odysseus." And they knew him. That was the thing. They knew his name, his story, his 10 years at Troy, his wanderings, what he had survived and what he had done and who he was. They sang it back to him with the accuracy of a comprehensive account, and the account was beautiful, and hearing yourself known that completely is its own particular seduction. "Come here. Listen more. We know everything. We will tell you everything." He pulled at the ropes. He screamed at his men to untie him. His face said everything. The pleading, then the commanding, then what must have been something close to fury when the crew, their ears full of wax, saw their captain thrashing at the mast and simply tightened the ropes. Perimedes and Eurylochus held the ropes and did not look at his face. They had been told. They did it. The island passed behind the ship. The sound faded. He was still tied to the mast. He was weeping or not weeping. The sources are divided on the specific physical reaction. What they agree on is that he wanted to go. With every piece of himself that was not bound to the wood, he wanted to go to the island. He did not go. The ropes held. The men rowed. The sirens fell silent behind them. He had the wax removed from the men's ears. He was untied. He stood at the stern and looked back at the island, growing small on the water, and he said nothing for a long time. The men did not ask. They had learned not to ask about certain moments. He had heard the sirens and survived. He was the only man in the history of the world who had heard the sirens and survived, because he had been willing to want something and not have it, because he had known himself well enough to know that he could not trust himself and had arranged accordingly, because wanting is not the same as having, and sometimes the most important thing is the rope. But there was no rest, because Scylla and Charybdis were ahead. Charybdis first, to understand the choice. A whirlpool, an enormous suction at the base of a cliff that 3 times a day drew the sea down into itself, and 3 times a day belched it back up. When Charybdis was drawing down, the rocks at the bottom were visible and the sea around it seethed, and the sound of it could be heard from a distance. When it was expelling, the water rose in a boiling column that smashed against the cliff face. If the ship went into Charybdis, it was over. Not the way that other dangers had been over, where you could fight or think or trick your way out. Simply over. The ship would be swallowed, and that would be the entirety of it. Scylla was on the other side of the strait, a cave high on a cliff face, above even the tallest ship's mast. Inside the cave, Scylla, 12 legs, 6 heads on long necks, each head with 3 rows of teeth. She hung out of the cave on her long necks and took what she could reach from passing ships. Circe had been clear. Hug the Scylla side. Lose 6 men, 1 for each head, or risk Charybdis and lose everyone. The arithmetic was unambiguous. Odysseus had not told the men about Scylla. He had told them about Charybdis. He had told them to row hard and stay to the cliff side and not look to the left at the whirlpool. He had armed himself with spears and stood at the bow watching the cave above. The men were watching the whirlpool. They could not help it. Charybdis was doing what it did, drawing down, the water going away from the hull with a sound like the sea being emptied, the rocks at the bottom visible, the sucking sound, the terror of it. They were watching the wrong direction. Scylla took 6 men. 6 necks came down from the cave above. 6 men lifted from the rowing benches, their oars still in their hands. The other men saw it when it was already happening. The men in the air called Odysseus's name. He stood at the bow with his spears, and he could not reach the cave. The cliff was too high, the necks too long, the angle wrong. He stood there with his weapons, and he watched 6 men carried into the cave, and he could not do anything, and the ship was past the strait. He later said, in all his wanderings, all the suffering, the sea and the deaths and the losses, what he saw in the cave above the Strait of Scylla was the worst thing he ever saw. 6 men, his men. He had known they would die there. He had not told them. He could not have saved them if he had. He carried that. He would always carry that. The ships passed through, the Sirens behind them, Scylla and Charybdis behind them. The men who were left were silent, rowing, looking at the oar benches where 6 men were not. Odysseus stood at the prow. He was looking ahead, always ahead. The island of Thrinacia was there, the island of the sun god's cattle. And Tiresias had told him, and Circe had told him, do not stop. Do not touch the cattle. Sail past. His men could not continue. They were broken with exhaustion, with grief, with the accumulated weight of everything since Troy. They needed to stop. He tried. He told them, sail past. Do not land. We keep going. Eurylochus said, we cannot. We are dead on our feet. Let us stop one night. Just the beach. We will not touch the cattle. Odysseus made them swear. They swore on everything. They landed. The wind changed and held them there for a month. 1 month, beached on the island of the sun god, their supplies running out, the cattle of Helios visible in their perfection on the hillside, and the men becoming what hungry men become. One night, while Odysseus slept, Eurylochus spoke. He said, we're going to die here of hunger, or we are going to die on the sea, or we are going to die somewhere else. At least if we eat the cattle, we die full. At least we die having eaten. The logic of a man who has stopped believing in the destination. They killed the cattle. They ate for 6 days. Helios went to Zeus and said, punish them, or I will take my light below to illuminate the dead and leave the surface in darkness. Zeus sent a storm. The ships left the island. Zeus sent a thunderbolt. The ship broke apart. The men went into the sea. Odysseus clung to the wreckage. He lashed the keel and the mast together with a strip of leather and floated. He watched his men drown around him. He watched Eurylochus go. He watched the last of his crew, the men who had been with him since before Troy, the men who had come from Ithaca years before when they were young, go under. He floated. He was alone on the sea. He was driven back through the Strait of Scylla and Charybdis, carried on the current overnight, arrived at Charybdis just as it was drawing down, watched his raft go in, grabbed the fig tree that grew from the cliff face, and held on while the sea below him emptied and the keel went down, and then waited while it slowly came back up, and when the raft was expelled, he dropped and landed on the wreckage and rowed with his hands. Scylla did not take him. He was alone now, one man on a raft, nothing to reach for. He floated west. Sleep now. Let the strait be quiet. Let Scylla withdraw into her cave. Let Charybdis do what it always does in the intervals between its terrible breathing. Simply be a place in the sea, a geography, a feature of the water that has no memory of what it swallowed and what it gave back. The Sirens are on their island, still singing. They are always singing. They will be singing long after Odysseus is home and old and gone, still singing the knowledge of all things to the empty sea. And somewhere on the water, a man on a raft is rowing with his hands in the direction of home. He heard the Sirens. He survived the cave. He went into the whirlpool and came back out. He is alone now, which is the thing that Tiresias said would happen, which is the thing he has been moving toward since the cattle were eaten and the ship was struck by lightning and everyone else went under. Alone, still going, still west. The rope held. Sleep. Close your eyes. Breathe. Some warnings are delivered and believed. Some warnings are delivered, believed, sworn on, and broken anyway. Not out of stupidity, not out of evil, out of hunger and exhaustion and the specific human failure that comes when the body's needs overwhelm the mind's knowledge. When the distance between now and the consequence is long enough that the consequence feels theoretical, and the hunger is not theoretical at all. This is that story. Tiresias had said, "Do not touch the cattle." Circe had said, "Do not touch the cattle." Both of them, the prophet who retained his mind in death and the sorceress who had watched the sea for centuries, had said the same thing with equal clarity. The cattle of Helios on the island of Thrinacia were sacred, not metaphorically sacred, not the way that certain places are called sacred because they are beautiful or old or associated with something important. Sacred in the functional sense. They belong to the god who pulled the sun across the sky every day, and harming them would be an act of direct, unambiguous sacrilege against the deity responsible for all light and warmth and the continuation of the visible world. Do not touch them. Odysseus had carried this knowledge for months. He had made his men carry it too. He had not wanted to stop at Thrinacia. He had said so, directly, clearly, before they even saw the island. He told his men what Tiresias and Circe had said, and he said, "We sail past. We do not stop. We keep rowing until the island is behind us." Eurylochus had spoken. Eurylochus, who had been the one who stayed outside the cave when the others went into Circe. Eurylochus, who had the survival instinct that the others lacked, but who was also, in this moment, the voice of men who had reached their limit. He said, "We are exhausted. We have been through the Underworld and the Sirens and Scylla. 6 of our men were taken from the rowing benches this morning. We are not machines. We need to sleep on solid ground. Let us stop at the island, make camp on the beach, and sail past the cattle. We will not touch them." The men agreed. They were already agreeing before he finished speaking, the agreement moving through the crew with the speed of people who have made a decision before someone puts it into words. Odysseus looked at them. He made them swear. He was not naive. He knew that an oath was not the same as an outcome, that men under sufficient pressure do things they have sworn not to do. But it was all he had. They swore by the strongest things they knew. They landed. The month. The wind came from the south and held them on the beach for 30 days. Not a gentle wind. A wind that made sailing impossible, that pushed the ships back whenever they tried to leave, that had the specific quality of divine obstruction, though whether it was Poseidon or some other force, Homer does not say exactly. 30 days. The supplies Circe had given them ran out in the first week. They fished. They hunted birds. They found whatever the island offered that was not the cattle. For a while this was sufficient. Then it was not. Then it was barely. Then it was not at all. And on the hillside above the beach, the cattle of Helios grazed. They were magnificent. The texts described them as broad-browed, straight-horned, beautiful in the way that the possessions of gods are beautiful, with a quality that exceeded what the category usually contained. Perfect cattle, the most perfect cattle in the world. They grazed undisturbed. The men looked at them every day. Odysseus prayed. Then he slept. This detail matters. He prayed, and then, while he was sleeping, Eurylochus spoke to the men. He said, "Listen to me. All deaths are bad, but the worst death is starvation. Slow, certain, without dignity, without a fight. We are going to die here on this beach if we keep waiting for a wind that is not coming." He said, "If we eat the cattle, perhaps we survive and reach home and can build a temple to Helios, can make offerings, can earn his forgiveness. But if we starve here, we are certainly dead, and we do not even get the chance to ask forgiveness." He said, "The cattle, at least, gives us the possibility of survival." He said, "I would rather die at sea, quickly, than die here slowly, doing nothing." The men agreed. They always agreed. That was the thing about Eurylochus. He was the voice of everything reasonable about despair, the advocate for the choice that felt like the only choice when all the other choices had been exhausted. They went to the cattle while Odysseus slept. They prayed first. This too Homer records, and it is one of the most painful details in the Odyssey. They had no proper sacrifice meal, no barley, no wine. They used oak leaves. They prayed with what they had, to the god they were about to offend, asking forgiveness preemptively, explaining their necessity. The cattle, the sources say, lowed strangely when the knife came. The skins moved after they were removed. The flesh made sounds on the spits. The island knew what was happening. Odysseus woke. He smelled the meat. He knew immediately. He had been afraid of exactly this, and the smell of roasting beef reached him before he had fully surfaced from sleep, and he knew, before he opened his eyes, that the thing he had been preventing for a month had happened while he was unconscious. He said, "Zeus, you gave me this sleep to destroy me." There was nothing to do. The meat was eaten. They were there 6 days. 6 days of eating, of the particular relief that ending hunger produces, of the men who had been half dead with exhaustion and starvation becoming something closer to alive. Odysseus ate with them. He did not maintain a separate virtue while his crew fell. He was their captain. Whatever they were eating, he ate. On the 7th day, the wind changed. They launched the ships. They sailed clear of the island. The sky closed. Not the gradual change of weather, but the sudden specific darkness of divine action. Zeus gathering the clouds above the fleet with the purposefulness of a god who has received a complaint and has decided to act on it. Helios had gone to Zeus. Punish them. My cattle. My sacred, untouchable cattle. Punish them, or I take my light below. Zeus raised his hand. The thunderbolt came down. The ship broke apart, a single bolt, into the center of the ship, and the timbers went in every direction, and the mast came down, and the men went into the sea. They were there, and then they were not there. The transition from sailing to drowning was that fast, that complete. The men died. Homer does not give them individual deaths here. They simply go under. They are mentioned as a group. His companions, his crew, the men he had been responsible for since before Troy. And then they are gone, and Odysseus is alone on the wreckage. He lashed the keel to the mast. He floated. This is the moment the Odyssey has been moving toward. Not the Sirens, not Scylla, not the Underworld, this. Alone on the sea. Everything gone. Tiresias had told him. Late, alone, on a foreign ship. That was the prophecy. The lateness and the aloneness were now accomplished fact. The foreign ship was still ahead. Calypso, then the Phaeacians, then the final crossing. But the loneliness was complete. His mother was dead. His men were dead. His ships were at the bottom of the sea. He was floating on lashed timbers in the middle of the ocean with his hands. He had known this was possible. He had tried to prevent it. He had made them swear. He had told them. The cattle had been eaten anyway, while he slept, by men who were not evil, who were simply hungry and exhausted and had lost their belief in the destination. That was the thing about the cattle of the sun. The punishment was not for wickedness. It was for the failure of faith, the failure of the belief that Ithaca was real, that it was worth the continued suffering, that the destination justified the denial. The men stopped believing. They ate. They died. Sleep now. Let the sea be still around the wreckage. Let the timbers float. Let the man on them lie back and look at the sky and breathe. He is alive. He should not be alive. The bolt that broke the ship should have taken him with it. He is alive because the Odyssey is not done with him. Because Ithaca is still there. Because Penelope is still weaving. Because a story this long does not end here, on a piece of wreckage in the middle of the sea. He floats. He breathes. He keeps going. The sea is dark beneath him. The sky is clear above. He is going home. He is still going home. Even now. Even alone. Even here. Close your eyes. Breathe. He washed ashore on Ogygia. Not dramatically. Not in the way that arrivals in myths sometimes happen, with omens and divine attention and the sense of something beginning. He washed ashore the way wreckage washes ashore, the way a man who has been floating on lashed timbers for 9 days washes ashore, which is to say barely, with the last of whatever was left in him after the ship and the thunderbolt and the sea. He lay on the beach. He breathed. The island was beautiful. This is the first thing Homer tells us about Ogygia. Not where it is, not who lives there, but that it is beautiful. A cave at the center, around it alder and poplar and fragrant cypress, vines heavy with grapes, for springs running clear water in 4 directions, soft meadows of violet and parsley. Even Hermes, when he comes later, stops at the entrance and looks around and feels the beauty of it before he goes in. It was the most beautiful island in the world. It was a prison. Calypso found him. Her name means she who conceals. She was a nymph, the daughter of Atlas, living alone on the island at the edge of the world with no neighbors, no visitors, no one, until the sea delivered this man to her beach. She took him in. She fed him. She healed him. She gave him shelter and warmth and the company of a divine being who found him specifically and genuinely interesting. She loved him. This is not a simple thing to say. The Odyssey is careful about Calypso. Homer does not make her a villain, does not make her a monster holding a man against his will through cruelty. She loved him. She offered him immortality. She offered him the end of aging, the end of the fear of death, the end of the vulnerability that being mortal means. She offered him everything that the gods had, in exchange for staying. He stayed. 7 years. 7 years on Ogygia with Calypso, and the question that sits at the center of those 7 years, the question that the Odyssey raises and does not entirely resolve, is this? Did he want to leave? Homer answers carefully. He says, Odysseus sat on the beach every day and looked at the sea. He wept. He looked west, toward Ithaca, and he wept. But he also stayed. Every night he was in Calypso's bed. Both things. The longing was real. The staying was also real. And the Odyssey, which is the most honest poem about the complexity of wanting to go home while also having become accustomed to being somewhere else, holds both without resolving them into a simpler story. He had lost everything on the way here. His men were dead. His ships were at the bottom of the sea. He had no crew, no vessel, no means of crossing the water between Ogygia and anywhere. Even if Calypso had released him on the first day, he could not have left. There was nothing to leave on. But that is not quite the same as saying he was only held by logistics. 7 years is a long time. Long enough for the sharp edge of grief to dull into something more habitual. Long enough for Ithaca, which had been the entire direction of his life for 10 years of war and 2 years of wandering, to become something that lived in the category of things that were real but not immediate. Long enough for the island and the woman and the ease of a life without the next catastrophe to settle into something that was not happiness exactly, but was the shape of days that did not require endurance. He had been enduring for 12 years. Ogygia did not require endurance. He wept on the beach, and he came back to the cave, and the fire, and the meal, and the woman who knew him. 7 years. On Olympus, Athena moved. She had always been on his side, the goddess of wisdom, who loved in Odysseus what she loved in herself, the quality of the mind under pressure. She had been unable to help him while Poseidon was watching. But Poseidon was away at a feast with the Ethiopians, and the gods were in assembly, and the moment was available. She stood before Zeus, and she said, Odysseus, you have forgotten Odysseus. He sits on an island, weeping, held by a nymph, unable to leave. He has done nothing to deserve this. He is a good man. He honored the gods. He has been suffering for 20 years. Zeus said, I have not forgotten him. But Poseidon, Athena said, Poseidon cannot hold him forever. Send Hermes. Zeus sent Hermes. Hermes arrived at Ogygia. He put on his golden sandals and took his wand and flew across the sea, skimming the surface the way seabirds skim, and arrived at the island and stopped at the entrance to the cave. He looked around. Even Hermes paused to take in the beauty of it. Then he went in. He found Calypso at her loom, singing. The fire was burning. The island was everything it always was. The fragrance of cedar and juniper in the smoke, the 4 springs running, the vines heavy outside. Odysseus was not there. He was on the beach, looking at the sea. Hermes told Calypso the message from Zeus. He said, Zeus commands that Odysseus be allowed to leave. His fate is to reach home. You must help him. Calypso was angry. She said, you gods are hypocrites. You take mortal lovers and you do nothing about it. But when a goddess loves a mortal man, you send messages and commands. Eos and Orion, Demeter and Iasion. And Naomi, she said, I saved him. He came to me wrecked, alone, dying. I took him in. I loved him. I offered him immortality. She said, but I cannot fight the will of Zeus. She said, I will help him go. There was a grief in this that Homer let sit without commentary. She had loved him. She was being told to let him go. She would do it, because she had no choice. And also because she loved him enough to do it even though she had no choice, which is the harder version of the same act. She went to the beach. She sat beside him. She said, you can go. He looked at her with the suspicion of a man who has learned not to believe good news without verifying it. She said, "I mean it. Build a raft. I will help you. I will give you provisions and a fair wind and point you toward home." He said, "Swear it. Swear by the sticks that this is not a trick." She smiled. She swore. She showed him the trees. 20 large trees, felled by his own axe over 4 days, shaped into planks and fitted together with the skill of a man who had built things before and had 4 days and the guidance of a goddess. He made a raft, not a ship, a raft, broad and solid, with a mast and a sail from cloth she gave him. On the 5th morning she bathed him and dressed him and loaded the raft with provisions, bread, water, wine, the dark, fragrant wine that divine beings kept. She gave him a fair wind from the east. He raised the sail. She stood on the shore. He looked back once. He was at sea 17 days. 17 days of good sailing. The star Boötes and the Pleiades and the Great Bear on his left as Calypso had told him, keeping the constellation on his left hand, going east and north toward home. On the 18th day the mountains of Phaeacia appeared. Poseidon saw him. He had been at the feast with the Ethiopians, and he was coming back, and he looked down, and there was Odysseus on a raft in the open sea closer to home than he had been in 20 years. He was furious. He raised his trident. He sent a storm. The storm was enormous. It tore the sail. It turned the raft. Waves the size of mountains, the sea going vertical around the small flat platform of wood and rope. Odysseus was thrown into the water and barely found the raft again, barely pulled himself back up, lying flat on the boards with the storm above him. A sea nymph appeared, Ino, also called Leucothea, a mortal woman who had become divine, who moved through the sea in the form of a gannet, who came to the surface of the storm and sat on the raft beside him. She gave him her veil. She said, "Leave the raft. Tie this around your chest. Swim. The veil will keep you afloat. When you reach land, throw it back into the sea without looking." He did not immediately trust her. He thought, what if this is another trick? What if leaving the raft is worse than staying on it? He thought about it while the storm battered the raft. Then a wave took the raft entirely. He tied on the veil. He swam. 2 days and 2 nights in the water. He swam toward the shore of Phaeacia, which he could not see, but which Athena, quieting the winds of every direction except the one that pointed him there, was pointing him toward. He reached the coast. Rocky, no harbor, the waves crashing against the stone. He grabbed for a rock, and the undertow tore him off, and the skin came away from his hands. He was washed along the coast looking for a river mouth, and found one and swam in out of the surf and lay on the bank. He threw the veil back into the sea. He crawled under the bushes above the riverbank. He covered himself with leaves. He slept. Ogygia was behind him. 7 years. 7 years of the most beautiful island in the world. 7 years of a woman who loved him and fed him and healed him and offered him the one thing that every mortal fears to lose, the body's continuation, the extension of the self beyond its natural limit. He had chosen the raft. He had chosen the storm. He had chosen 2 days in the water and a rocky coast, and lying under leaves with his hands bleeding. He had chosen Ithaca, not because Calypso was nothing, not because the 7 years had been only endurance, but because Ithaca was Ithaca, and Penelope was Penelope, and the life he had been pulled away from was still waiting in the same place he had left it. He had chosen mortality. He had chosen home. Sleep now. Let Ogygia be quiet in the dark, the cave empty, the fire still burning because Calypso tends it out of habit or grief or the long discipline of a life lived alone, the 4 springs running, the vines heavy. She is alone again. She was alone before he came. She will be alone after. The sea between Ogygia and everywhere else is wide and dark, and she cannot cross it the way he crossed it. She cannot choose elsewhere. She is the island, and the island is her. He chose to leave. She let him go. Both of those things cost something. Sleep. The shore of Phaeacia is quiet. Under the leaves, a man is sleeping who has been at sea for 20 years and is finally, for the first time in as long as he can remember, within reach of home. He does not know yet. He is asleep. Let him sleep. He has earned it. Close your eyes. Breathe. He woke to the sound of girls laughing. Not in the cave. Not on the raft. Not in the salt water with the storm above him. He was under leaves on a riverbank, and he was hearing laughter and the slap of wet cloth on stone and the ordinary sounds of young women doing laundry on a fine morning, which was the most civilized sound he had heard in longer than he could calculate. He lay still for a moment. He took stock. He was alive. He was on land. His hands were torn, and his body was salt-crusted, and he had been in the sea for 2 days, and before that on a raft for 17 days, and before that on an island for 7 years. He needed help. He stood up from under the leaves. The girls screamed and ran. All of them except one. The Princess Nausicaa stood her ground, and this detail, a young woman holding still while her companions fled from a salt-encrusted naked stranger emerging from the bushes, tells you something about who Nausicaa was. She had been sent to the river by Athena, who had appeared in her dream the night before in the shape of a friend, and said, "You should do the laundry today. Your wedding is coming. You will need clean clothes." Athena, always working, always placing the right person in the right place at the right moment. Nausicaa had come to the river, and here was Odysseus. He did not rush toward her. He thought carefully about approach. He was naked and frightening looking, and the situation required delicacy. He stood at a distance, and he spoke to her from where he was. And what he said was one of the most carefully constructed speeches in the Odyssey. A man with nothing, using only words, trying to create a situation in which a young woman would choose to help him. He said, "Are you a goddess? Because you have the quality of Artemis. But if you are mortal, your parents must be the happiest people alive to have a daughter like you." He said, "I have been shipwrecked. I have nothing. I ask only for a cloth to cover myself and directions to the city." He said, "May the gods give you a husband and a house and a good life, because there is nothing better than a husband and wife who share a home in harmony." Nausicaa looked at this ragged man. She said to her companions, who had come cautiously back, "This man has clearly suffered greatly. We must help him. Strangers and beggars come from Zeus." She gave him clothes. She gave him food and oil. She told him, "I will take you to the city, but not with me. The Phaeacians will talk if they see a princess bringing home a stranger. Follow behind. Find the palace of my parents, King Alcinous and Queen Arete. Go to my mother first. If she is on your side, you will get home." The city of the Phaeacians. It was the most civilized place in the Odyssey. The most civilized place in the Greek world as Homer imagined it. A city of sailors and craftsmen, and a king who loved poetry and games and received strangers well. A city that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of time and geography, closer to the gods than most places, sitting at the edge of the world between the human and the divine. Their ships were magical. This is how Homer describes them. They needed no helmsman, no steering oar. They knew their passengers' minds and sailed there, moving through the sea faster than anything, guided by thought rather than seamanship. They had never been wrecked. They never would be. Their ships were alive. Into this city Odysseus walked, in the borrowed clothes Nausicaa had given him, Athena wrapping him in a mist of invisibility until he reached the palace, so that none of the Phaeacians would see him and start asking questions before he could reach the queen. He went to Arete first. He sat at the hearth. He touched her knees. He asked for passage home. The mist lifted. The Phaeacians saw him, a stranger at the queen's hearth. There was silence. An old man spoke, Echeneus, the oldest counselor, who remembered the proper forms for such situations. Receive him. A man at the hearth is under divine protection. Give him food. Then ask who he is. Alcinous rose and took Odysseus by the hand. He led him to the seat of his own son. He fed him. Arete recognized the clothes. She said, "Stranger, I will ask you directly. Those are clothes that I made with my own hands. How did you come by them?" He told her about Ogygia, about the storm, about Nausicaa. He was careful to protect the princess's reputation. He told the story in a way that made clear that Nausicaa had acted with perfect propriety, had given him clothes and food and directions, had not brought him to the palace herself in order to avoid gossip. He was always careful, always thinking about what a story would do to the person in it. Alcinous said, "I wish you would stay. I would give you my daughter." He offered his daughter to the man who had just arrived from the sea. He meant it as a compliment, as the highest hospitality available. Odysseus said, "I want only to go home." The games. The next day Alcinous held games in his guest's honor. Athletic competitions, running, jumping, wrestling, discus. The Phaeacians competed among themselves with the particular pride of people who were very good at what they did. One young man, Euryalus, taunted Odysseus. He said, "You don't look like an athlete. You look like a merchant." Odysseus picked up the heaviest discus. He threw it past every other mark on the field. He said, "Try to beat that. Any of you." He said, "I am not bad at anything you can name. I have suffered much, but I am not bad at anything." He offered to compete at everything except running. His legs were stiff from the sea. He acknowledged that honestly. No one challenged him. The bard sang. That evening at the feast, Demodocus, the blind bard, sang. He sang the Trojan War. He sang the argument of Odysseus and Achilles. He sang the wooden horse. He sang the fall of Troy. And Odysseus wept. He pulled his cloak over his face so the Phaeacians would not see. But Alcinous was watching, and Alcinous saw. He stopped the feast. He said, "Stranger, you weep at the song. Who are you?" He told them. He stood in the great hall of the Phaeacians, and he told them everything. Not in the way that a man summarizes a difficult journey, not briefly, not with the protective distance of someone who has decided that the events are over and the telling can be managed. He told them in full, starting with the Cyclones, the Lotus Eaters, the cave of the Cyclops, and the name Nobody, and the stake in the eye, the bag of winds and Ithaca appearing on the horizon and the bag being opened, Circe and the pigs and the year on the island, the underworld and his mother, and Achilles saying he would rather be a poor man's laborer than king of the dead, the Sirens tied to the mast, Scylla and the 6 men taken from the rowing benches, the cattle of the sun, the ship, the wreckage, Calypso, 7 years. He told them 7 years. He told them 20 years. The hall was silent while he spoke. Alcinous and Arete and Nausicaa and all the assembled Phaeacians listened to a man tell the story of what 20 years of trying to get home looked like from the inside. He was not performing. He was not making the story more dramatic or the suffering more heroic. He was telling it the way it was. Alcinous said, "We will take you home. Simple. Final. without conditions or negotiations or the complex obligations of the kind of hospitality that expected reciprocity. He said, "Load the ship with gifts, bronze and gold and woven cloth, more than Odysseus would have brought from Troy if he had come home directly. He has suffered. We will send him home with more than he lost." The Phaeacians loaded their fastest ship. Odysseus said goodbye to Nausicaa. He said, "All my life I will pray to you as a goddess, because you saved me." She said, "Remember me." He said, "I will remember you." He went to the ship. He slept the whole way. Homer makes this specific and beautiful. The ship moved through the night with the supernatural speed of Phaeacian vessels, driven not by oars but by thought and divine purpose. And Odysseus lay in the stern and slept the deepest sleep he had slept in 20 years. He did not steer. He did not navigate. He did not watch. He did not think about what was ahead or what might go wrong or how to handle the next crisis. For the first time in 20 years, someone else was responsible for getting him somewhere. He slept. They arrived at Ithaca before dawn. The sailors carried him ashore, still sleeping. They set him on the beach with his treasure beside him, the bronze and gold and cloth from Alcinous's hall, all of it stacked carefully around the sleeping man. They went back to their ship. They sailed. Poseidon, returning from the Ethiopians, saw the Phaeacian ship coming home and understood what it had done. He went to Zeus. Are they going to keep doing this? Taking anyone anywhere, no consequences? Zeus said, "Turn the ship to stone as it enters the harbor. Let the Phaeacians see it happen." The ship was turned to stone in the harbor of Phaeacia. The mountain above was turned to stone around it. The Phaeacians never sailed for strangers again. Their ships, which had never been wrecked, which had sailed by thought across any sea, those ships were done. Odysseus woke on Ithaca. He woke and he did not know where he was. Athena had wrapped the island in mist, not to trick him, but to protect him. He could not arrive home openly. There were men in his house who would kill him if they knew he was back. The return required what the whole journey had required: patience, concealment, the long strategic preparation before the thing itself. He sat up and looked around. He saw a harbor he did not recognize, olive trees he did not recognize, a mountain he should have known. He said, "Where have those sailors taken me? This is not Ithaca." He wept. He was on Ithaca. He was weeping because he did not recognize it. 20 years. He had been away 20 years, and he did not recognize his own island through the divine mist and the distance of time. Then Athena appeared, in the shape of a young shepherd. He asked her where he was. She told him, "This is Ithaca." He felt something move in him that Homer calls joy, but which is probably more complicated than a single word. The specific feeling of a thing long sought that has finally arrived, mixed with everything the seeking cost. He was home. He was finally home. He did not go to the house yet. He sat on the beach with Athena beside him, and they planned the next move together, the way they always had. The goddess who loved his mind and the man who used it, planning the final act of the longest homecoming in the history of literature. He was home. Sleep now. Let Ithaca be quiet in the pre-dawn dark. The harbor still. The olive trees still. The mountain above the island that Odysseus did not recognize, but that has been waiting for him without moving for 20 years, the way islands wait. Penelope is in the house above. She is sleeping. She does not know he is there. He is there. He is finally, completely, irreversibly there. The sea is behind him. The Phaeacian ship is stone in a harbor he will never see. And a man who has been trying to get home for 20 years is sitting on the beach of his own island with a goddess beside him, planning the last thing. One more thing, then it will be over. Sleep. He is home. He is finally home. Close your eyes. Breathe. He did not walk through the front door. 20 years away, and he did not walk through the front door of his own house. He sat on the beach with Athena, and he listened to what she told him about what was inside the house. And what she told him was this: there are over 100 men in there. They have been eating your food and drinking your wine for 3 years. They want your wife. They are planning to kill your son. Do not go in as yourself. Not yet. Athena touched him. She changed him. She aged him, withered the skin, bent the back, took the brightness from his eyes and replaced it with the milky vagueness of old age. She dressed him in filthy rags. She gave him a staff and a worn leather bag and made him into what no one looks at when they pass on the road. An old beggar, unremarkable, the kind of person that the powerful dismiss with the specific contempt of those who have never needed to be helped. He would go into his own house as a stranger. He would watch. He would learn what 20 years had made of the people he had left. He would plan. And then, when everything was ready, he would stop being a beggar. He went first to the hut of Eumaeus, the swineherd, an old man who had been managing Odysseus's pigs for 20 years with the steady faithfulness of someone who had never stopped believing his master would come back, who had never transferred his loyalty to the suitors who occupied the house, who spoke of Odysseus in the present tense though everyone else had moved to the past. Eumaeus fed the beggar without knowing who he was. He complained about the suitors. He told the old man about Penelope, still waiting, still refusing to choose, still holding the house together through sheer will and the patience of a woman who had decided that the absence of certainty was not the same as the certainty of absence. He said, "Our master would have been home by now. He must be dead." But Penelope will not accept it. Odysseus listened. He did not tell him. Not yet. Telemachus came. His son, 20 years old, born in the year his father sailed for Troy, raised without him, managing a childhood and then an adolescence in a house full of men who wanted his mother and were waiting for him to be old enough to dispose of. Athena had sent him back from Sparta, where he had been looking for news of his father. He came to Eumaeus' hut. He sat across from the old beggar. Athena appeared to Odysseus alone, outside the hut, and told him, "Now, tell him now." Odysseus went outside. Athena reversed what she had done. The age fell away. The stoop straightened. The eyes cleared. When Telemachus came out, he saw a man he did not recognize, but who looked like something beyond ordinary. He said, "Are you a god?" Odysseus said, "No, I am your father." Telemachus said, "You cannot be. You are too young. A god is tricking me." Odysseus said, "No god. Your father. Athena changed my appearance. Look at me." Telemachus looked. He saw the jaw. He saw the eyes. He saw whatever it is in a face that carries family in it, even across 20 years and the distance of disguise. They wept together, father and son who had never been in the same room for longer than the first year of Telemachus's life, weeping in a swineherd's hut on the island of Ithaca while the suitors ate in the house above. They planned. Odysseus told his son what was going to happen. He told him, "Tomorrow I will go into the house as the beggar. You go back first. Whatever you see done to me, whatever the suitors do, however they treat me, say nothing. Do not intervene. Wait." He told him, "Remove the weapons from the great hall. Tell the suitors you are moving them to prevent accidents. Leave only 2 swords and 2 spears, hidden where we can reach them when the time comes." He told him, "You will know when to act." Telemachus nodded. He went back to the house. The house. Odysseus entered his own house as a beggar the next day. leaning on a staff, wearing rags, the bag over his shoulder, every inch the wanderer he had been for 10 years. The suitors were there, over 100 of them, the sons of the noble families of Ithaca and the surrounding islands, who had moved into the palace of the absent king and were consuming it from the inside with the systematic thoroughness of men who believed that they would eventually get what they had come for and saw no reason to hurry. They looked at the beggar. Some ignored him. Some mocked him. One threw a footstool at him. He bore it. He sat in the corner and he watched. He ate what was thrown to him. He catalogued them, their names, their positions, their characters, which ones were worst and which ones were merely following the others, which ones were redeemable and which ones were not. He bore everything. Argos, outside the house, on a dung heap, lay a dog. An old dog, skeletal, flea-ridden, lying where he had been left for 20 years, apparently waiting with the patient faithfulness of animals who do not understand that waiting has a limit. His name was Argos. He had been Odysseus's dog. He had been a young hunting dog when Odysseus left for Troy. Brilliant, fast, the best hunting dog on the island. He was very old now. He was almost dead, but he lifted his head when Odysseus came through the gate. He wagged his tail. He had recognized him through 20 years in the disguise that had fooled everyone else. Odysseus looked at him and looked away, so that no one would see him react, so that no one would notice a beggar weeping at a dog. Argos put his head back down. He died. He had been waiting 20 years for this. He saw his master. He died. Penelope came down to the hall. She had heard there was a beggar who had traveled widely and might have news of Odysseus. She came to question him. This is the scene the Odyssey has been building toward for 24 books. Odysseus and Penelope in the same room for the first time in 20 years, and Odysseus in disguise, and Penelope not knowing, and the two most intelligent people in the Greek world talking around the edges of a recognition that would happen in its own time. She asked him about Odysseus. He told her a story, partially true, partially invented, about meeting Odysseus on his way to Troy, about what he looked like, what he wore. He described the brooch on his cloak, a golden brooch with a hound holding a fawn. Penelope recognized the brooch. She wept. She said, "I gave him that brooch." She said, "He will not come home. He is dead. I know he is dead, but I cannot stop waiting." He told her, "He is alive. He will be here before this month is out." She looked at him. She did not believe him. She believed him. She was not going to let herself believe him. The old nurse Euryclea washed the beggar's feet. It was customary. A guest was given food and a foot washing. Euryclea had been in the household for decades. She had nursed Odysseus as an infant. She was washing his feet when her hands found the scar. A scar on his thigh, from a boar hunt in his youth, a story Homer tells in full at this moment, interrupting the tension of the recognition with the complete history of how Odysseus got the scar, as if to say, "This is who this is. This scar has a story. The scar is 20 years of a life concentrated in a mark on the skin." She stopped. She looked up. She recognized him. She grabbed his leg. She looked at his face. He grabbed her chin. He said, "Not a word. Not yet. You will ruin everything. Say nothing." She looked at him with the expression of a woman who has been waiting 20 years and has just touched what she was waiting for and is being told to put it down. She said nothing. She kept washing his feet. The bow. Penelope came into the hall. She carried the great bow of Odysseus, the bow that had been in the storeroom since he left, that no one had been permitted to touch. She set it before the suitors, and she said, Whoever strings this bow and shoots an arrow through the rings of 12 axe heads set in a row, that man I will marry." The suitors looked at the bow. They looked at the axes. They tried. One by one they took the bow, and they tried to string it, and they could not. The bow was stiff with disuse and with whatever quality it had been given by the man who had owned it for decades, and none of them could bend it far enough to loop the string. Odysseus, in the corner, asked to try. The suitors laughed. Some objected, an old beggar touching the bow. It was an insult to the competition. Telemachus said, "Give it to him." Penelope said, "Give it to him." He strung it. He took it in his hands, and he looked at it the way you look at something you have not held in 20 years, but which your hands remember. And he tested the string the way a musician tests a string, plucking it, hearing the note it made, a clean, clear note, like a swallow's cry. He set the arrow. He shot through all 12 axes without leaving his seat. He looked at Telemachus. Telemachus buckled on his sword. He shot Antinous first. Antinous, the worst of the suitors, the ringleader, the one who had thrown the footstool, the one who had been most vocal about killing Telemachus. He was lifting a cup of wine when the arrow took him through the throat. The suitors looked around for the attacker. Then the beggar spoke. He said, "The contest is over. Now I try for another mark." He stood. He was not a beggar anymore. He was Odysseus. The killing. He had the bow. Telemachus had his sword and spear. Eumaeus the swineherd and his second loyal servant were at the doors. The suitors were unarmed. The weapons had been removed from the hall as Odysseus had instructed. They tried to rush him. He shot them as they came. Arrow after arrow, the quiver deep, working through the hall with the systematic precision of a man who had planned this for days and was executing it without hesitation. Telemachus went to the storeroom and came back with armor and spears for himself and the two servants, and they stood at Odysseus's side. One of the suitors found a way to the storeroom. He brought arms for the others. Athena appeared. She appeared as Mentor, an old friend of the household, and she stood in the rafters, and the suitors threw spears at her, and the spears went wide, and her presence above the hall meant the spears of Odysseus and Telemachus did not go wide. The suitors died, all of them. The maids who had collaborated with them were hanged in the courtyard afterward, a detail that sits uncomfortably in the poem, a piece of the violence that Homer records without the narrative distance he sometimes applies to difficult moments. The hall was cleared. The house was cleaned. Penelope came down. She sat across from him. She looked at him for a long time. He had been washed and dressed, and Athena had restored him again. The age removed, the brightness returned, the body of a man rather than a beggar. He looked like himself. He looked like Odysseus. She did not move. Her women kept telling her, "Go to him. Embrace him." 20 years. She sat still. She said, "If you are truly Odysseus, you will understand why I cannot simply accept you. I have been deceived too many times. I have been careful for 20 years. One more test." She said to Euryclea, "Move the bed out of the bedroom. Set it up in the hall so our guest can sleep." Odysseus went still. He said, "Who moved the bed? When I built that room, I built it around an olive tree. I carved the bedpost from the living tree. The bed cannot be moved. It is rooted to the earth. Who moved it?" She broke. This is the recognition, not the scar, not the bow, not the killing of the suitors. The bed, the secret that only they knew. The bed built into the living olive tree that only Odysseus could describe. She ran to him. She said, "Don't be angry. I was afraid. I have been holding myself together for 20 years, and I could not simply let go at the sight of a face." He held her. They wept. Homer gives them that night. He gives them the long night of people who have been apart for 20 years, lying in the bed that could not be moved, telling each other everything. Odysseus told her the wanderings. She told him about the suitors, about Telemachus, about the years. He told her about Tiresias's prophecy, the oar that must be carried inland, the final sacrifice to Poseidon, the task still ahead. She heard it. She said, "If the gods give us old age together, we will bear it." The morning came. He went to find his father. Laertes was in the fields, old and worn, working the soil in the rough clothes of a man who had given up on comfort years before, who had been grieving his son for 20 years in the particular way of old men who outlive what they were living for. Odysseus walked up to him. He described a scar. He described the trees his father had given him as a child, the pear trees, the apple trees, the fig trees, the vines, the 13 pear trees, 10 apple trees, 40 fig trees, 50 rows of vines. Laertes looked at him. His legs gave way. Odysseus caught him. They stood in the orchard, father and son, 3 generations of the same family on the same island. And the war was over, and the wandering was over, and Ithaca was Ithaca, and the olive trees were the same olive trees they had always been. There was still fighting. The families of the suitors came with weapons. Eupeithes, the father of Antinous, leading them. One battle, brief, in the fields outside the city. Athena stopped it. She appeared and she said, "Enough? Stop. Both sides have paid. Stop." They stopped. A treaty was made. The killing ended. 20 years. That is what the Odyssey contains. 20 years of a man trying to get home, delivered in the form of a story about the 10 years after Troy, the wanderings, the losses, the islands, the women, the monsters, the gods, the sea. But underneath all of it, the same orientation throughout. West, Ithaca, home. He made it. He did not make it easily. He did not make it quickly. He did not make it intact. His men were gone. His ships were gone. His mother was dead. 20 years of his son's life were gone. 20 years of his father's old age were gone. 20 years of Penelope waiting alone in a house full of men who wanted to replace him were gone. He made it anyway. Sleep now. Let the house on Ithaca be quiet. The suitors are gone. The hall is clean. The great bow is back in the storeroom. The bed built around the olive tree holds 2 people who have not slept in it together for 20 years, and the olive tree that is the bedpost is alive in the ground beneath them, rooted deep into Ithaca, going nowhere. The sea is out there. It is always out there. It will always be out there, with its storms and its islands and its gods who hold grudges and its currents that carry men away from where they are trying to go. But tonight the door is closed. Tonight the olive tree holds. Tonight Penelope is asleep, and Odysseus is home. He is finally, completely, permanently home. Sleep. We are done with the sea. We are home. This is where we leave you for tonight. But the story isn't over. There is a world beneath this one. A world of rivers that the dead must cross, of judges who weigh every life, of fields reserved for heroes and places reserved for those who are not. There is a ferryman who does not carry passengers without coin, and a 3-headed dog who guards the gate, and a darkness that has its own geography. Next time, Hades, the world below. This is a chronological series. Every episode picks up exactly where the last one left. You don't need to hold anything in your mind right now. Just rest. Your body needs this. Your mind needs this. And we'll be here every 2 days with the next chapter. Tomorrow, and we say this with certainty, the names you heard tonight will feel more familiar. That is not nothing. That is exactly what this time was for. Millions of people lie awake at night, convinced they are falling behind, that every hour of sleep is an hour lost. You know something they haven't figured out yet. This time was not wasted. It never was. If tonight felt like something, if these stories found you at the right moment, subscribe and join us. Leave a comment. Hit like. We're building this community together, and your support helps us keep going. And if you'd like to know how much sleep your mind and body actually need, not a general answer, yours specifically, visit us at geniussleep.rest. We built a free sleep calculator there just for you. Enter your age, your lifestyle, your daily rhythm, and it will tell you exactly how much sleep your body needs. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Every episode, every night, wherever you listen. Genius Sleep Academy will be here every time you close your eyes. Sleep well.